Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Spectra. Divorce. Definitely not music to the ears of anyone. Not a very pleasant word to hear. Because it's always synonymous with the breaking of a very strong bond between family members, between previous lovers. However, sometimes it is the only way out of a predicament, of a lot of jeopardy. It is the only way out to keep people's sanity. So, why does divorce happen? Why does it take place in general? And another very important aspect is that people have noticed lately that there is a very clear high percentage of divorce amongst new immigrants to Canada in specific. And I believe it might be correct for other countries of the world. Our guest tonight can shed more light on that. And amongst immigrants and refugees alike, the percentage of divorce is higher than usual. So what are the reasons for this high percentage of divorce amongst immigrants and refugees? How can we stop that? And what are the long and short-term effects of divorce on the spouses and on the other family members, the children? Also, how can we stop this altogether from the very beginning by choosing the right partner for our life? The person who can, carry on his or her life with us happily. To shed more light on all of this and much more, I'm really delighted tonight to be accompanied with Violin Narouz Gad, who is a certified Canadian counselor. Violin, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
Violin, to start off, if you can shed some light on, why does divorce happen in general?
So that's a very interesting question, because if you are to go on the web and to do, a general search, you're going to find that it gives you so many different articles, and each article you look at will give you different reasons. And sometimes it will, rate it, will rate a certain thing, for instance, the money issues as number one. And then you go to another article, it'll say, infidelity is number one. And so there's so many different things that continuously, as you look, you will find so much different information that it's really hard to pinpoint and say, yeah, this is it. This is what we need to avoid. That's the big problem. And on top of that, it actually changes year to year. So I bet you anything, at the end of this year, if we are to look at some statistics, we're going to find some really interesting statistics given COVID and what we've been dealing with, and quarantining and having to be put with, our partners for much, much longer time than we anticipate in a day. And so the bottom line is that the way to look at it is that really marriages that end in divorce and marriages that continue on face the same problems. The question is, how do we deal with these problems? If I know how to, that's the thing that kind of prevents it from going, south. And so another thing to really think about is that with these articles I was telling you about, most of them are poll based, which means they ask people, what was the reason that you got a divorce? There's only one researcher that I know of, his name is John Gottman, where he actually did research by observation. So he would observe couples, and he did that over about 40 plus years now that he's been doing this, and has kind of come up with some main things. So one of the things that he says, one of the biggest things, is a loss of friendship. So when the two people are no longer friends anymore, that's one of the basic things. And we don't really think about that, because we think, he's my husband or she's my wife. I have friends.
Oh, so that's a very interesting part you're saying here. So it's a prerequisite, actually, for a healthy marriage to have your spouse. Your spouse should be your best friend, or at least one of your very intimate and close friends in your life.
I would say so. And if your friendship with your spouse starts going down, chances are you're going to start leading either parallel lives or really different lives, and it's really hard to continue on with the marriage at that point because if you don't see eye to eye, if you don't have common interests, if you're not in each other's world and understand each other's world, you won't have much in common anymore, and you start kind of drifting apart, and all of a sudden you're like, what happened? We were good, what happened? And the last thing sometimes people think about is, oh, let's look at our friendship and see what's going on there. What happens after a loss of friendship is that fighting starts getting really nasty, and that leads us to money problems, sex problems, infidelity, issues with things like, how do we raise our kids? Should we let them do this? Should we let them do that? All of that starts happening because at the base of this, there's a loss of friendship.
Thank you very much for this great introduction here. And let me ask you this question. So um, you notice that there is a higher percentage of divorce amongst immigrants and refugees. And you've worked with refugees not only in Canada, you've had some experience working with refugees in other parts of the Middle East too. So can you shed some light on, are there specific reasons that we can associate with, divorce amongst immigrants or refugees in particular?
Yeah, and so just a disclaimer first. The stuff that I've shared with you before, the research was done in North America, and most of the stuff was done with people that have lived in North America for a long time. So I don't necessarily believe that that is a reflection onto other parts of the world or really necessarily refugees. So speaking of which, I really don't have any solid numbers when it comes to this. However, I can give you from my own personal experience and my thoughts on what might have happened there. So I think with refugees, one of the biggest things is that when someone is displaced and they lose everything, the only person that they end up coming when they immigrate, for instance, to a different place, and they're a refugee in a different place, is their family. And if there wasn't a good connection to begin with, putting so much pressure like this kind of move, which doesn't come by choice most of the time, can really break a person, and it can really break a marriage. And so I've seen that happen over and over again, for one. Another thing is that sometimes divorce laws in North America, for instance, are a lot more liberal than
Mhm.
in countries back home. So once people see that, they're like, oh, wait a second, so I don't have to be stuck here. I don't have to do that. I don't have to stick with
Okay.
it. So that's another reason I would assume is one of the biggest reasons.
So here you're referring to maybe like social bonds, social norms that like where divorce is a taboo, is shame.
Right.
Well, in North America, it's not that much of a shame. Like if that's your choice, you can go ahead. Like no one can really, hold you back.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So, for instance, in India, the divorce rate in India is extremely low. And they believe that the reason that is because societal pressure and family pressure kind of shapes that belief and the values. So you can't really go ahead and do that. And like you just said, a lot of shame, a lot of, this is not acceptable. There's stigma around it. When people from India come to North America and they see that, hey, this is a little different, I have a little bit more freedom here, then you see the divorce rate among that race rise. And same thing actually also in India these days for the younger people. That is also rising because the effect of tradition on the newer generation is not as intense as it is on the older generation. So we're seeing some of these trends rise as well.
Okay, so actually a follow-up question I would say is that from your experience, would you say that like divorce is higher among specific ethnic groups, among specific religions, among specific socioeconomic backgrounds? Do you think that, like people with a specific background, whether it's racial, religious, or economic, or social, have a more likelihood of going for a divorce than others?
So again, I don't have statistics for that, but from my own personal opinion and my own personal experience, I don't necessarily think so. I think that, for instance, so Spain, for example, Spain is a religious country. It's a Catholic country, and divorce is frowned upon. But Spain has some of the highest divorce rates in the world right now. And so sometimes, even if the country itself or the race has these beliefs and something happens, and sometimes we're not so sure what it is, and it's different from what you would expect. And so I think there's a huge effect, a huge influence for religion, for race, for ethnicity, and for socioeconomic status for people on whether they, stay together or not. However, like I said before, there are deeper reasons for that really influence that. And even if your religion, for instance, says it's okay for you to divorce, let's say, then the couple are really committed to each other, and they go through such a hard time and they don't want to let go. They want to work through it. So even though divorce is allowed and there's no shame around it and all of that, they still want to work hard and make it work. So it's really, I've seen it all. I've seen, people who are really affected by religion or race, and others that are like, no, we really want this to work. We'll do whatever it takes.
Okay, so this drives us to ask the imperative question, in my humble opinion, which is, what is the meaning of marriage? Because divorce comes from marriage. Without marriage, we will not have divorce. So what is the meaning of marriage? And is the meaning of marriage a relative thing? Like it varies from one culture to the other? And is there a healthy definition of marriage? Would you say that there is a right definition of marriage?
So those are a lot of questions. So I'll try to answer your questions as much as I can here. So meaning of marriage, I think that yes, between cultures, I have seen a huge difference in what marriage means to each culture. And so, for instance, in Canada, we're multicultural, and so it's really hard to say that simply Canada's belief in what marriage means is this, because we are such a mix. We come from so many different walks of life, so many different countries, and we're all here, and so we kind of mesh together in a big way. And so even with immigration, a lot of people have varying ideas on what it means. And so what ends up happening, I think, is this: people will move from one country to another, if we're talking about immigrants, for instance, or refugees, and they have certain beliefs of what it is, and they might keep some of that and adopt some of what they see. And so with immigration, people's minds are open to a lot more ideas. And from that, they can each kind of have their own, meaning of what marriage might mean to them. Now, in our countries, I think in our Arabic countries, marriage is something that is really connected to religion in a big way. Either a Christian religion or a Muslim religion, regardless, it's very, very connected. But when it comes to, for instance, coming to North America or in Europe, well, not all of Europe, some parts of Europe, it's a government thing. It's a decision you make, you go, you do your thing, and that's it. And for some people, it's a combination of both. And based on that, then you get a meaning for marriage. So for something that is connected with religion, a lot of people will say, this is a covenant that is set by God. Others will believe, this is something, we just want to do this because legally, if we are to have kids, we want to make sure that financially it's better for us that way and better for the kids. So really, it depends on where you live, where you are. I know I'm not giving you great straight answers here, but I think this is such a unique topic, and it's really hard to have some definitive answers on things, if that makes sense.
No, no, I absolutely understand what you're saying. And now, 2 points here in marriage, and that's a very reoccurring actually thing amongst couples. So when a new couple come here to Canada, for instance, they're both new to the country and they both need time to integrate. But sometimes one spouse integrates at a much faster pace than the other one. Or sometimes they come at the same level, but after some time, there is a big discrepancy between one spouse and the other. And sometimes it's the opposite. Like, I can come much better than my wife here to Canada, but by time I stay stagnant, or actually I might regress, but she will progress and she'll greatly surpass me. So is jealousy one of the reasons for divorce? Would you say that jealousy is one of the big factors for divorce?
It's quite possible. And I would say just the question you asked kind of brought something else into mind for me, that with that discrepancy, you're looking at someone who might have abandoned some of the beliefs and the values that both couples might have held at one point. So it might not really be jealousy for some couples. It might be, well, how can you just abandon everything that we believe in and all our values, and you're just doing your own thing? And this is not right. And so then you have this huge fight between the two. One is going like, I'm not abandoning, I'm changing. The way I'm thinking is changing, and we need to adapt. We need to kind of assimilate to everything around us. And the other person's going like, no, this is just not going to work. And so then they drift apart. And you can't have a spouse as a friend when you're thinking different like that.
Okay, but how about like the fact that when someone surpasses the other, like academically or professionally, and so you know, sometimes it's like, you know, the spouse, and let's be more specific here, it's the wife makes much more income than the husband, or she's much more successful. And here, like usually in Oriental cultures, this might be a big issue.
Yes, 100%. And I don't know if that would surprise you, but it's actually something that has been a problem for some couples in North America who do not come from a culture like our culture. So sometimes even if a wife makes more money, eventually, the couple gets married and the wife starts making more money because she has a career change eventually. That created problems and people have split up because of it. So definitely this could be a big, big problem in immigrants.
And the other point here is sometimes one of the spouses finds him or herself between the hammer and the anvil. And the hammer and the anvil can be two things here. So he or she can be torn and between the new culture, the new adoptive culture, the new country, and it has its norms, its values, its way of thinking, and its way of behavior, which really contradicts with the beliefs of their spouse. On the other hand, sometimes with refugees, or sometimes there's a big family here. So I don't only come here with my spouse, with my wife, but I might come with my mom and dad as well. So so sometimes the in-laws, the mother and father-in-law, or like my parents, would push me towards one direction, but my wife would push me towards the other, and they are always in continuous conflict. So where do we go from there?
So One of the most important things in a marriage is to, maybe I need to preface my answer to a question you previously asked and I didn't answer, which is really, what does a good marriage look like, in a sense? And so there is this researcher, his name is Sternberg, and he says that, I find his theory really interesting because he kind of puts it out in the shape of a triangle, and he says it's passion, intimacy, and commitment. And so he says it's really important that all three are there. Otherwise, you don't have something that continues on. So the passion, he says, is kind of like your drive. So this is the romantic love, the part that gets you like, oh yeah, I need to see her. I have to call her. I can't, and all of that happens when you're starting to get to know each other, and, even through engagement, and there's a huge infatuation. And that is
There's
usually.
the euphoria, the initial euphoria that happens at the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. And believe it or not, this could go for a year and a half. So if you've met and you got married after 6 months, let's say, or 4 months or something like that, that euphoria from that love, if let's say it wasn't an arranged marriage, you actually, met and fell in love and all of that, could last for a very long time, a year and a half. And then all of a sudden, your spouse is not who you thought they were. And marriage hasn't changed them. Things haven't changed them, but you've been in that euphoric space, let's say, and now you're coming down from it, and now you're kind of seeing clearly. But that passion piece of marriage is extremely important. It's not something a marriage can survive without, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the second thing is intimacy. Intimacy is the emotional part of a relationship. So when a husband and wife are able to sit together and talk through things, when they are really close to each other, when they can, almost cry together when something is sad, and they're connecting on that level, or they're happy together on things that are good. So it's that emotional connection. And then number three is commitment. And the commitment part could be, the religious piece of it, or the governmental piece of it, depending on where you're from and what you believe in. But it's that piece where when things get hard, so it's that the cognitive piece, the mental piece. When things get hard, that's what keeps you going. Because usually passion is right when things get hard. When things get hard too, intimacy is not awesome. You don't feel so emotionally connected with your spouse when you're fighting with them. But then you've got the commitment to kind of hold you over until you get over that hump. And so to go back to your question based on that, when things are really hard, if your marriage is based on those three things, and you've worked through your passion, your intimacy, and your commitment, let your commitment get you through the hard times so that your intimacy can come back in time. And you got to remember, you guys are always a team. When you lose that piece and you let family, you go onto your parents' team, or your spouse goes on to their parents' team, then you're split apart. And when that happens, the chances of you being one team and rooting for each other to get to, your goals as a couple and as a family, it becomes really difficult. So
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it's a very pressing question here. Like, how can I do this magic formula here? Because it's more like a seesaw battle, really, between my parents and my spouse. And if I take my spouse's side, my parents will say that I'm like, ungrateful. I don't appreciate what they've done to me. And, like it's a mistake that we accepted you to get married to this woman or this man. And they would start really like, really emotionally tormenting their son or daughter. On the other hand, the spouse says, you love me no more. So how do you take this balance? And usually, like, you're sandwiched, you really get squashed between both of them.
Yeah, and you described this so well. And you're right. This is a very real issue in marriages, and not just our cultures. So many other cultures have the same issues. And to that, I say, we need to learn as a culture. Unfortunately, we're not very good at this. We need to learn to be assertive. And learning to be assertive means I need to know what I really want and what I really need. And that, first of all, I need to decide, does my core family, as in my wife, myself, or my wife and, sorry, my husband, myself, and my children, come first or not? Because as soon as you get married, that decision has to be made. If you continue to put your own parents above your own family, you're definitely going to struggle, because you are going to be sandwiched, because you don't know what your priorities are at that point.
So not even put them at an equal level. So like my spouse should come first.
Absolutely. This is your
Okay.
core family. They need you. You need them. And your family has done so much for you. Your parents have done so much for you. And your spouse's parents have done so much for them. But marriage is about you committing to this new person in your life, and they become
Mhm.
your priority. And I think one of the biggest problems for our families and our culture is that we don't do that priority, and we're guilted into, well, but I'm your parent, and how can you just abandon us like this, and how can you do that? And I think that you need to figure out a way to find a balance. Sometimes parents can be very thinking in their own ways of
Mhm.
before, and things have been done very differently than the new generations are doing these days. And their expectation is for you to always lean to their direction,
Okay.
and so it makes it very difficult for you to be assertive. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying this is probably one of the hardest things. If you want to avoid an eventual divorce, you do need to make your family a priority.
And here when you say assertive, because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like you're the expert here, but what I usually notice is that if you're not assertive and you're only passive, if you're passive for too long, and things will start piling up, and when things pile up, you'll explode and you'll become aggressive. So you'll just jump from passive to aggressive. While assertive is the healthy midway between both.
Yep, you totally got that right. That's absolutely true. And maybe the one thing that we need to maybe talk about a little is that being assertive does not mean that you get what you want, right? That's the big issue.
Okay.
So being assertive means that you are standing your ground, you are being gentle about what you're saying, but firm. So
Mhm.
let's say, for example, Christmas is coming up. So let's say, for Christmas, you've decided, you and your spouse, that for certain days you're going to be at this family, for other days you're going to be at the other family. So let's say your family has a big problem with that. And they go like, well, last year it wasn't like this, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on. And so your answer, if your answer is assertive, and you put your family first, and you and your wife have made a decision, or you and your husband have made a decision, then you say, Mom, Dad, I totally understand. This is so frustrating for you. I am so sorry that it's not what you expected, but we've already made the decision. So they might guilt you into things. But then we've prepared this, and we've done that, and we've arranged everything around this. And so then you go again and you say, I'm so sorry you had to go into so much trouble to do all of that. I'm sorry this is really difficult for you, but we have decided this. And so if we go into, if we pint up, like you said, we build, and then explode, of course we're going to become aggressive, because we're not getting what we want. And so we have that tendency. But if I pull back and I say, hey, this is not going to get me anywhere, with aggressive, I'm just going to fight. I might get what I want, actually, when I'm aggressive, but it's not really where I want to be.
And I think like when you become aggressive, you might become aggressive towards the wrong party.
Yeah, you can
So
displace it for
yeah,
sure.
like you're really pressured by your spouse and you would explode in your parents' face, or you're really being pressured by your parents' face, but you usually explode in the face of the weaker one or
Right.
the more gentle one. You're just, like you're sick and tired. I cannot take it anymore. So I just need to ventilate. And when I ventilate, I might ventilate in the wrong direction, or
Yeah.
the easier direction usually happens.
Yeah, and then if you really think about it, you're actually, it's happening on both ends. Like you're getting pressure from both sides. And so if you're getting pressure from both sides, you might explode on both sides, because it's just
Yeah,
like, I'm so
absolutely.
done. And
Absolutely.
and then you're misunderstood. This person, just there's so much asked of you here, so much asked of you here, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? And that's why it's so important for me to know where my priorities are. If I know where my priorities are and I learn to be assertive, then I can be in this space where I can protect my marriage and also still have a good relationship with my parents. Over time, when a person is assertive, they teach people around them what their boundaries are. And people eventually, even the closest to you, whom you thought they will never change, they will, even though they might throw some words here and there, they will respect your boundaries eventually, because they're seeing that you're firm and you're gentle too. You're not being aggressive about it, but they will
Okay.
eventually respect it. It just takes time. It takes consistency, definitely effort, and you got to know where you stand and stick with it and be a team.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. But now, like, if we come to the worst case scenario, if divorce is the only way out, how can we resort to a peaceful, accord, a peaceful agreement between me and my spouse in order not to go to the more devastating and the very, very destructive side effects of divorce? What is the best scenario for a peaceful, like separation?
That's such a hard question. So I think that it really depends why the divorce is happening. So if there is some serious, issues that have happened, there's been so much fighting, and it's not, to begin with, it's not a simple, separation of sorts, which I doubt that happens very often to begin with. It's really difficult to know where to go with that. So if I am to give a piece of advice on that, is I would say make sure that as soon as trouble starts, go see a professional, go see a counselor, go see someone whom you can talk things out with, because that way it can give you a chance to understand where you stand and what issues have risen up for you, what has gotten you to where you are. And I would say, research does say that couples usually go to counseling 6 years too late. And a lot of the times when they do, a divorce is imminent, just because it's been too long, and it's better to go earlier. So when you start seeing some trouble in your marriage that is not, getting you to a place of resolution, and you're stuck on the same things, I'd say it would be really good to go see someone. And so if it comes to it and you're in trouble, I'd say if you are to see someone on your own and sort through your own emotions, your own issues, then you know what's important to you. You know what part you want to fight for and what part is not important enough for you, so that you can minimize, the fighting and, all those pieces that no one likes when it comes to something like this.
Another very important question is, we all know that divorce can be very destructive for the family, for the emotional and the mental well-being, psychological well-being of the husband, the wife, and the kids. But in order to avoid all of this, isn't it imperative that we should really be very cautious while we choose our partner of life? So what kind of, like, is there a prescription you can give us, like do's and don'ts? What kind of character should we avoid? Like, what kind of scenarios should we go through? And is would you strongly advise a long period of engagement, for instance, before marriage?
Okay, so this is good. I like this question a lot. So I think, and I'll give you some of my own experiences in terms of my patients as well here. I'd say one of the biggest things that you can look for is in a partner is that a partner is teachable. a person who is willing to change, a person who's not simply stuck in their own ways and my way or the highway, a person who has a desire to grow. And you yourself need to be a person who has a desire to grow, because marriage is a school. And it's a very difficult school. It's a place where you will be challenged the most. If you are walking into marriage feeling like, yeah, this is where happiness is, you're going to be sorely disappointed and very quickly, unfortunately. And some people will tell you, know, go in and to make the other person happy. But then you do have these little pieces in you, and you're like, if I make them happy, they'll make me happy back. So we're good there, right? And so you got to really be sure that of reasons why you are getting married. If it is about, you know, well, I'm a girl, I'm getting old, I better get married, that kind of idea, this is not a great idea, because it might not end the way that you want it to end. You might be stuck in a place that, same thing for a man, you know, I'm getting old, I want someone to take care of me, my parents are not going to stick around forever. So these reasons are not healthy reasons to get married. So I'd say sit with yourself and think a little bit on, why do I want to get married? These are very important questions to ask yourself. And when you think, I want this, 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 and this in my future wife or husband, first of all, are you these things? Ask yourself that. You want someone who is selfless. Are you selfless? Is there some work you need to do on yourself when it comes to that? And so those are a couple of things. I've talked about friendship at the beginning. So I'd say, hey, be friends with that person. You're going to be with them forever. So if that's the plan, no one, you know, gets married wanting to a divorce or planning for a divorce, right?
Yeah,
And so if you're planning, yeah, so if you're planning to be with that person forever, then you got to work on the friendship piece. Definitely do something together before you get married to learn how to fight cleanly. Fighting is not a bad thing. In fact, research will tell you 69% of problems in successful, healthy marriages are problems that are never resolved. Only 29%, sorry, 31% are resolvable problems. And those problems are, well, are we going to spend Thanksgiving at your parents or my parents? They have to resolve, because eventually Thanksgiving is going to come and you got to get there, right? But issues like, can you please stop throwing your, you know, your clothes on the floor every time you come home? These are perpetual problems. They're going to keep on happening. So do we just fight every time this happens and fight in a bad way? Or do we spend some time learning how to talk to each other so that this doesn't become a nasty fight every time? So learn with your future partner how to fight cleanly. This is one of the most important things. Values and beliefs. The more your values and your beliefs are matching, the easier things will be. I'm not saying you're going to be identical. Actually, differences between husband and wife, it's awesome, because it keeps life interesting and you get to learn from each other and you complement each other. So there's something so beautiful about that. But at the same time, you got to keep in mind that those differences are also what causes issues. I hear the question coming.
Yeah. So here we're talking about, like you said, they complement one another. So should they like be a complementary partner or a supplementary one? So
would you mind explaining the difference to me in your mind?
okay. So complement, like, you know, I fill the gaps for you, but a supplement is something that's good, but if we don't take it, we won't die. You know, it's an extra. So should my husband or wife be an extra, like a catalyst, or should they be vital? So should I look for someone who's vital to me? Without them, I can't continue, or just someone who can sort of be a catalyst or push me, a booster, just a booster.
So I'm going to even challenge that and say, be with someone that you can be without, but don't want to be without. So I think it's the best way to think about it, because I don't think any of us really, 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 we can live without another person. It's possible to live with one other person, even if they are, you know, your absolute best friend, best marriage ever, you know, all of that. You'll live. It's not going to be great, but you'll live. But if you don't want to live without them, that gives you a really good clue that there's things in that person that I feel bring so much to our lives and have shaped me in such amazing ways. And my character is completely different and better because of that person, that I don't want to live without them. That's how I would think about it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. And another tricky, and like it's maybe my last question here, but I'm not quite sure if that would be a last question, because this might, have other questions embedded inside it. Is like, this is the, I think, the $1 billion question, not the $1 million question, is this balance between, love, lust, vis-a-vis, like, versus, the mental, you know, balance. So in other words, like, there is someone who I'm very emotionally attracted to, very sexually attracted to, but they wouldn't make the best husband or wife because of their like socioeconomic status, their like level of education, their cultural background, or maybe they might not be accepted by my parents. On the other hand, there is like Mr. Right or Miss Perfect, but that's on paper. But they don't really touch me deep inside. They don't touch my heart deep inside. So which one should I choose here? Like,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
tough balance, really.
Yeah, great question. And it kind of makes me want to go back to those three I told you about: the passion, intimacy, and commitment. And so older generations in our culture, they tend to really emphasize the commitment part, right?
Yeah.
So this person is they've studied the same thing you did. You're a pharmacist, they're a pharmacist, we're good on that level. Their family is, middle class, we're middle class, we're good there. So you have these check marks next to certain things, and so it makes sense. Yeah, let's commit, let's do this, we're good to go, and a marriage happens. It doesn't mean that it's a happy marriage, because all the check marks are in the right places. And you've also got, these relationships, and I find that's more common in younger couples and in cultures like North American cultures, where I look at them and I melt. I say, this is it, this is the person. And so we're talking about passion here, right? So we're really and like I said, the tendency of passion is to actually come down. The tendency of intimacy is to go up and kind of level, and the tendency of commitment is to go up even higher and really balance things out for that triangle. So I think a good way to look at it is that you really need all three parts, and you need them to be well balanced so that you have a good recipe for a marriage that lasts a long time. And so I don't think that passion alone is better or commitment alone is better. I think that the more aware we are that there is intimacy that needs to be worked on, passion that needs to be worked on, commitment that needs to be worked on, then we are off to a good start.
And yeah, I said this was the last question, but actually another one popped into my head now, like children. Like in many cultures, they would say, okay, you guys have children, especially they say this to the wife, to the mother, to the woman. You are a mother, so you should endure whatever is coming at you because of your children. Is this a correct thing to say? Is this a fair thing to say? Is this for the best interest of the children to be living with a suffering mother that hates her life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, with the research, for instance, and that's just a simple example, they found that a mother who has anxiety issues is 7 times more likely to pass that on to her children. So if a mother is in a good headspace, chances of her children having, anxiety or mental health issues in general is way less. So I'm not going to say it's a good thing, for a mother to be stressed out or to be going through such a hard time. And one of the biggest issues in marriages, and I've seen that a lot in immigrants and in refugees in particular, is abuse of all forms. Families will come here. There is physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, all kinds of different abuse that goes towards a wife and towards the children, and sometimes a wife towards her husband too. It does happen. And so with stuff like that, it's very hard to say that it doesn't affect a child. Of course it does. And it can leave some serious marks, and it can be this, for lack of a better word, a generational curse, where they grow up, they get married, they do the same thing over again, and these children are being affected, and so on and so forth. And this has to be broken somewhere, and sometimes moving to North America is the answer. if someone decides, I no longer want to be a part of this, and I don't want this for my children, so I want to move into something different than this, and they have an opportunity to do that. And that goes to the whole question you asked me before about divorces happening in immigrants and in refugees, and that is one of the big reasons.
Vailin Aruz-Gad, the certified Canadian counselor, I really can't thank you enough. It's been a real pleasure having you with us in the program tonight, and you've shed light on very, very important issues. Really, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And last but not least, dear viewers, if I may conclude with you, I'll just take, what Vailin has just said, which is the magic word is being assertive. Whether it's with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, with your in-laws, your mother and father-in-law, it's the magic word. Be assertive. Be firm. Stand for your point, but don't be aggressive. Because if you're passive, if you're not firm, you'll become aggressive. And aggression always destroys everything. And unfortunately, many times aggression comes out in the wrong direction. You might, be under pressure from your in-laws, but you will explode in the face of your parents and your children or your husband, and so on and so forth. You need to be very, very assertive with your spouse, with your children, with your family. This is the magic word. Just be assertive. And don't ask of people things that you do not have. Be honest with yourself. So if I'm blaming, my wife for I'm suspecting that she's knowing other men and she's talking to other men, well, how about myself? Am I really honest? Am I really sincere? What is my level of fidelity really? Am I a faithful husband to my wife? So, and I want her to work hard. Am I working hard enough? And the other way around. So don't ask of other people things that you don't have. Don't ask of your parents or your children as well things that you do not have. If you ask of people things that you do, you should start with yourself first. And if you become assertive, usually that's the best way out. I hope this was beneficial to our dear listeners and viewers. I thank our guest one more time. And until we meet again, I hope you have a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.